Guild Wars 2 introduced their newest PvP mode, which has been requested for quite some time, and yet the community is reluctant because the last two game modes were 2v2s and 3v3s, which were fun but lacked the appeal of diverse combat roles. And there was Stronghold, which was a callback to Guild Wars 1 GVGs and MOBAs, but only looked like those on the surface while actually lacking fun or engaging design. So now here we are with their next attempt, called Push. And it's such an early look that the map is in its alpha stages with substitution assets and generic mechanics. Obviously these will be worked on later, but this time ArenaNet is trying to get much more feedback before actually launching a finished product, which we've seen as a successful strategy in recent games like Baldur's Gate 3, where the entire first act of the game was available to test for years and ended up being the most polished and fun to play act because of how much feedback it got. So with that in mind, we need to accept some things can be a bit unpolished, but don't let that hold back your criticisms. If at any point this sounds like shit to you, or you can think of a way it could be more fun or better designed, leave a comment. Otherwise, you're trusting others to advocate for what you want. So what is Push? It's basically a payload game mode if you've played Team Fortress 2 or Overwatch, where you need to capture an objective and escort it all the way to the enemy base. Whoever stands inside the ring holds the objective, but if players from both teams stand inside the ring, it doesn't move. So you need to beat the other team so that you can gain control of the payload. The team who gets the payload into the other team's base wins. It's a simple mechanic to conceptualize, but also has some complexity with deciding who gets to stand inside the objective, because you know there are going to be tons of fireballs and spears chucked into that circle, and you need someone tanky to contest it. Now the first thing everyone thinks of when they try to win is how long I can survive with the tankiest build possible. As far as I know, there's a mechanic that stacks up, making it harder to survive the longer you're inside the objective. I personally dislike an arbitrary mechanic like this because it's usually resulting from a lack of game balance, which is aimed at bringing down the best builds, but ends up hurting other builds which want to perform the same role but with a much more balanced power budgeting. But at least this mechanic does lower the efficiency of bunkers, which overall leads to a more fun environment. If one team does not win before the 15-minute timer runs out, the winner is decided by who pushed further into the other's territory during the course of the match. You can keep pushing once the timer ends, but overtime ends when the payload stops moving. Since there's only one payload, everyone wants to be fighting at the payload, but there are some buffs that you can pick up around the map that can give you more damage or force the payload to move, giving some incentives to split momentarily. If you want to try this game mode, it's currently available during the off season if you queue in ranked mode, but this is for a limited time. If you do end up playing, you'll obviously want to think about the builds that perform best in this game mode, because it won't be the same as in Conquest, and it won't be the same as 2s and 3s. Conquest places more emphasis on rotation, which allows roamers to be some of the more powerful classes because of their faster rotations and high burst damage. But in 2s and 3s, roamers are pretty useless because they don't have sustain to take direct fights for very long, and so healers and DPS are the main stars of 2v2s, and duelists can work decently in 2s because of the low amount of players in those fights, so a tanky damage dealer is still great there. The push meta is in between Conquest and 2v2s, with roamers not being as useful due to the emphasis on teamfighting, and duelists will also struggle because a constant 5v5 makes it hard for them to contribute to their team with their generally selfish builds. However, even though supports and DPS are the bread and butter here, a duelist can still be useful as they can be the one person to stand inside the node and use CC to knock others out, or to survive long enough to force the attention of the enemy onto them. Likewise, roamers can still be useful because in these huge teamfights, there are going to be these heavy glass cannon DPS builds trying to destroy your team with tons of AoE damage, and roamers are the best suited for countering other glass cannons. However, I still think a thief is not the best for this job, as once you've killed the enemy team's glass cannon, you really can't do much. So something like a Greatsword Mirage or a Sikkim Soul Beast might be better for the job of a roamer. Most people will just play the most boring DPS, which is currently the Condition Reaper, but I've been playing a DPS Spear Tempest build and doing insane amounts of damage in these fights, and while generally I get countered by focus, My teammates can stand in the circle for me while I rain down on the enemy team. Also, if your duelist is standing on the node, then your support doesn't need to stand on it, and they can orbit between their duelist on the objective and their DPS who are standing further away to support whoever needs it the most. I also tried out an altruistic healing firebrand that can be extremely tanky while supporting allies, and has the option to take Sanctuary to place on the payload and knock everyone else out to ensure that I can push the payload. So even though it looks pretty simplistic, there's a decent amount of diversity to it. One of the main issues I've seen with some matches is when the enemy team has multiple healers and bunkers, and your team has no one who can stand on the node or no healers. While it is true that bunker comps are always going to be the easy way to win against uncoordinated teams, I still think that's more of an issue of the other team just not knowing how to deal damage. I went against some of the most putrid bunker comps with my Spear Tempest build, and I was obliterating them, even with my teammates playing some questionable roamer or duelist builds. So if your team doesn't have enough damage, then it's kind of on them for not doing enough damage, and you're going to lose just like you would in Conquest. So if things are too boring and tanky, then people aren't bringing enough damage, and if it's still not enough, it could be a balance problem, and we need those changes for all PvP modes then. The buffs are also a good counter to bunker comps because you can get more damage for your team if necessary, but one addition I suggest is that there could be some special action key spells, like the ones you get from Jin's Dominion, like a well that removes all boons in a small area, or any kind of ability that promotes momentum and destroying defenses. But I don't know if this is the best suggestion because this mode is intended to be newbie friendly and there's already a ton of clutter in these fights. Limiting detail in your graphics options might be necessary. So regardless of playing to win or not, the main question is whether or not push is fun. I'd say yes, but not more than Conquest. Push is permanently team fighting, which to some people is much more fun than chasing a thief around the map who's just trying to win by avoiding larger fights. However, if your team is countered by the enemy team or they just have a better composition, you don't really have much option to play. You get pushed, and that's it. Now if that's the case and they push you, the match can and will end very shortly, but I think it's much more fun and addicting when there's a chance to win every single match, which Conquest enables more so because strategy allows you to rotate around bad matchups and losing situations. For others that don't care to get better and play in losing situations, push might be better for them because they can just go next. I don't agree with this, but I know it's a popular opinion. Obviously, not every game mode needs to be as complex as Conquest to be fun, and their intent for making this game mode was a casual PvP experience that is more simple. While that is a good idea, I don't know if this necessarily fills that niche. Team fights can be some of the most complicated things in PvP, and positioning is much more punishable when you're in a full 5v5 than in a 1v1 or 2v2. Also, because supports are quite powerful, you need to know how to deal a lot of damage to break through that, which most new players aren't optimized at yet, and so playing against a support can feel like a brick wall. That being said, it's still mostly a fair fight in push because it's a 5v5 most of the match, unlike Conquest where you can be outnumbered due to rotations, and deciding how aggressive or passive to play based on the situation is something that takes a while to get used to. I know many players who have played this game for a long time and still complain about being 1v2'd, even though they know that's the result of their actions in the past which led up to this moment. But that's a much more hardcore topic to approach that we can't expect most people to understand. So it's definitely fun for the type of people who might not like Conquest, but still can be tangentially fun for those who already like Conquest. Now for those who liked Guild Wars 2 PvP in the past, and are wondering if push is going to fix the unpopularity of PvP, absolutely not. The issue with PvP is a lack of content to keep players interested for long enough, which leads to a hemorrhaging of the player base, and while push adds content, it's too little too late. Realistically, we need push to be fully released and iterated on after its launch, then we need a reworked stronghold that is actually fun and not based on escorting NPCs. We need 2s and 3s to be polished and balanced to facilitate them to be fun, and maybe one other game mode on top of this to truly have a diverse enough experience for PvPers to want to stick around. And then we need access to all these game modes all the time to promote a healthy community of push players, of stronghold players, and of 2s and 3s players. As it is currently, you only get to play 2s and 3s during off season, which is a small fraction of time, so players don't get to practice those game modes much to get good at them, and getting good could make things much more fun for them. And if they do happen to enjoy them, it gets snatched away from them when the next season starts. So yes, push is a step in the right direction, but as is the recurring problem, it's never enough. Once again, let me know what you guys think about the new game mode in the comments, what you think could be changed, and if you want to see good builds for push, then as always check the builds on guildgen.com, where builds labeled as DPS and supports are your go-to builds. Stick around to see some of the highlights from several of the games of push that I played, and as always, if you like the content or found it helpful, please like and subscribe, and I will see you all next time. Come on, get the damage, get the damage. We need the damage. There it is, boys. There it is. Push him out. Bleed him. CC him. Push, boys. Push. Push. Can I get this guy? Oh my god, get him. Get him. We got him, boys. Push. There's 4 of them, or maybe 2. CC though. Bro, I'm doing huge damage. Huge damage, bro. Holy shit, dude. Oh my god, bro. This is the spec, bro. This is it. This is the damage, bro. This is it. Look at those 4K ticks. Holy. The 4K ticks, bro. Nah, you ain't gonna res. He rezzed. He rezzed. Oh, this is big damage. Holy dude. Holy. I like the timeline. Nothing happened. Wait, what? 46% damage. 1 million damage.